Hello and welcome to Cosmic Soul Sisters. We are a portal to all things magical, mystical, and spiritual, and we're helping to raise the consciousness of humanity one conversation at a time. I'm your Cosmic Soul Sister, Shara.
And I'm your Cosmic Soul Sister, Leah.
And today, in today's episode, we will be exploring a variety of topics including ritual, spirit care, the divine feminine and divine masculine, tarot, astral travel, just a few things to name a few. And we are joined today, we have a very special guest. Miss Roxanne Ruby is here on the line with us. She is a dear friend and a business partner. She's a creator and a performer and an herbalist and really just a student and teacher of many things mystical and magical and spiritual. So welcome, Roxanne. Thank you for being on the call today.
Hi, thank you, Shara and Leah. So excited to be here and get to dive into some deep cosmic conversations.
Well, we are delighted to have you here as well. And, Leah and I have had a chance to talk with you on other occasions, and we know a bit about your backstory, but I'm wondering if you could share with our listeners just a little bit about your backstory and maybe how you've been building a relationship with spirit.
Sure. Wow, where to even begin? Well, spirit has absolutely been at the center of my life for my entire life. My parents are both yogis, and so I was raised kind of with an interesting combination of the philosophy of yoga and the Eastern traditions of mindfulness and the connection between our breath and our body. And then Christianity. My dad is kind of out of the box Christian, but I grew up really deep in that faith, studying the Bible and that particular tradition. And then my grandfather is a Buddhist Lama. And so I had this interesting foundation of yoga, Christianity, and Buddhism that kind of was, my whole childhood growing up, learning about prayer and meditation, and ultimately kind of hybridized those as the core of my belief system. And then as I grew up, pretty early into adulthood, I found the Native American church through Sweat Lodge and those different beliefs of really like earth wisdom. And now more recently, I have embarked on a really incredibly fulfilling journey in Hermetic Kabbalah and studying the tree of life, and particularly the Egyptian cosmological understandings of what it means to be human in relationship to the natural and the divine worlds. So I'm kind of like a melting pot of many different traditions. And my path has definitely always circumambulated around my relationship to spirit. And that's pretty much my greatest priority, is cultivating a relationship to the divine.
Excellent. I know that you grew up with prayer and spirit all your life. Was there a catalyst, or was there a point in time where you woke up and started questioning the 3D paradigm, or were you always in this path of questioning like your entire life?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've always just felt very much the presence of something greater, and I've put my faith in that. There was definitely like some catalysts for me at an early stage, like during high school, where I actually started to just like read and study a lot more, and kind of find my own path. And there was a couple of books that I read that just really made me kind of like look at a bigger picture of this dimension that we're living in, and how I just really felt like there's got to be more to the story. And I guess I adopted this mentality, like very much so starting at like, I can remember clearly like 16 years old of just kind of a mindset of that, like we're living in a miracle. Like the fact that the sun rises every morning and that flowers blossom and that we can like be sitting here having a conversation with each other. Like, I mean, I think the human experience is just an ever unfolding miracle. And so I started to really become in awe of creation at that time in my life, and then just became passionately curious of all the different ways that this unfolding miracle is honored and celebrated in traditions around the world and throughout history.
Do you ever find it difficult to balance though the 3D world with this other world that you're talking about?
That's a good question. Less and less, I would say. There have maybe been times in my life where I've felt like there's, you know, like how some people explain like the matrix, you know, like this world that we're living in, that from the more that I understand, because lately my studies have been looking into like the way distant past of humankind, and this reality that we're experiencing right now is kind of just a blip on the radar. Like we're as far as I am understanding it, like we're kind of experiencing a very basic form of humanity compared to how mystical the human experience has been in the past. And what I'm finding is that the more that I cultivate my inner understanding of this greater experience of life and just like commit to that as my truth and my practice, then the more magical and mystical my life is on a daily basis. And so like I'm able to magnetize more things, and that miraculous existence that I was talking about just becomes more profound. And so I find that instead of like putting myself into a box of the 3D world, I'm just fully committed to living life as a much more mystical, cosmic experience.
And so you're not often worried about other people's opinions or thoughts about.
Yeah, less and less. You know, it's kind of like it's like having my relationship with creator and my relationship to life is like so intimate and so personal. Like I love talking about it and jamming on it and, you know, speaking philosophy and having conversations like this, but also at the end of the day, it's like, you know, that relationship is so much just like mine that I think I've gotten to the point where like I don't need to explain it or be understood by anybody else. Like it's just something that I have so much faith in, and there's an incredible amount of confidence that comes with that.
I love that. Love that.
I do too. I definitely do. So, Roxanne, could you speak a little bit about the divine feminine and the divine masculine, maybe some principles of that, and just an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a huge topic of our time. I have a lot to say about it. But the first thing that I want to speak to is this reality of that I think we're entering into more and more of like non-binary. And I just first of all want to be clear that like in my own languaging and in my own experience of life, I'm very careful now to not label things as masculine or feminine. And like I know in my own life experience, I'm very like in my life, just naturally, I present as very young, or like the label that has been put on me is like very masculine. Like because I'm very active, I'm very much like a go-getter and driven. And like, I'm the person that's like directing the whole show and like making things happen and having the idea and like seeing it through. And like that driving force is really strong within me. And because of that, I've had a lot of people be like, oh, you're so masculine. And like, at the same time, like, I'm like, a glamorous performer. I love dressing up. I mean, I'm like totally in touch with my feminine side. And, you know, I'm a straight female bodied human. And so to be kind of put this label on me of like, oh, you're so masculine, always felt a little bit like, okay, I don't really feel that way, but you know, if you feel that way about me, whatever, I can work with that. But some of my teachers lately, I've been studying with two really amazing women named Isis and Eve, and they have really been developing a deeper understanding of the non-binary existence. And we're seeing this more and more, even just in the human experience of, you know, a lot of like gender fluid people coming into the world, or just, you know, being able to recognize that more. And so I think that that's important to mention, is that I don't want to like categorize them too much, except for that, you know, these masculine and feminine, or yin and yang qualities are a natural part of life. I mean, this is how creation happens, and both are very present within an individual. Like, I have those yang tendencies. I've also been consciously cultivating my yin side, especially in this past year of COVID and having to go inside and really like cultivate this like a harbor for creativity to happen. And as I'm studying the Kabbalah, which is the tree of life, there's this dynamic between the severity and the merciful sides of creation. And that is how it's understood with the feminine and masculine. And the feminine is actually the severity, and the masculine is the merciful.
Oh, no,
And the feminine is also, I know, right? Kind of like counterintuitive, but yeah, the feminine is the one that's able to like create the space and hold the container. And like, that includes holding boundaries and, you know, being like that fierce mother. And then the masculine is just like that direct creative potential that can go out and make things happen. And it takes the two working together in harmony for life to keep living. And so that's been my experience lately, is like really honoring both of those sides of myself and integrating them in a healthy way. And then the other piece that I think is really worth noting is that we're living right now in a very young society. You know, this patriarchy that has been around for over 2,000 years, the leaders of our country, you know, the fact we've never had a female president, and like the world leaders, the men that are making choices, have set up society in a very young, masculine way. And the more that I reach further back into our past and look at these, you know, pre-patriarchal societies that were more matriarchal, which doesn't mean that it's the opposite of patriarchy. It doesn't mean that the women were just running the show. It means that there was just more balance, and that there was representation in our spirituality of the divine feminine and goddess worship, and then that tying into recognizing the earth as our mother and a source of life, and treating her as thus, you know, caring for the natural world as though she is our mother. And, you know, that's just such a healthy relationship dynamic that I feel like has really been lost through these patriarchal ways. But there's a revival happening. And what we're seeing across the globe is that more so the people that are part of this, like kind of what's called like the New Age movement of restoring our relationship to creation, the vast majority of the leaders in that movement are women. And there's some really amazing men that are showing up to the table, but the Dalai Lama said the Western woman is going to save the world. And I do feel like there's this polar shift happening where the power that women hold as life givers and nurturers, even in our severity, is really needed on the planet at this time. And so I feel like that divine masculine and feminine relationship is actually, we're at a point where the feminine is rising up the yin qualities of life, the womb of creation, is here to like balance out and restore our systems and our society.
Could you give us some examples maybe for our listeners of ways that they might be able to increase their yin?
Or balance it out.
Mm-hmm. I guess they can increase that as only if they're feeling out of balance as far as yin and yang.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a very simple practice is coming back into our breath and sitting still and breathing in through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. You know, it's like the easiest thing ever, but it's amazing how hard it can be to get some people to sit still for 5 minutes. And, you know, not even necessarily calling it meditation, but just that simple practice of breathing and what it does for our nervous system to just take those long inhalations through the nose and then like sighing it out. It basically sends a message to our nervous system that like everything's okay and we can be at ease, instead of like this hypertension that a lot of our society is kind of driving people into. So that's one. And then I imagine, I like to cultivate my yin by imagining myself as a magnet for what I want in my life. And so instead of that mentality of like, gotta go out and get it done and make it happen and achieve the goal, you know, it's like, I just imagine myself and like fully have a visceral experience of whatever it is that I'm dreaming for my life, for my family, for the world. And I just sit in that state as if it's already been realized. And imagine that I'm like a huge magnet and that I'm just magnetizing, like that's the feminine, right? Like if you look at it on a physiological perspective, like male body versus female body, like the female body receives and the male body gives. And so tuning into that, whether you're a female or a male bodied person, to just be that receptive force is kind of incredible. Like I've had things happen where I'm like, wow, I didn't even have to like go out my front door. And this thing that I was hoping would take place, like just happened before my eyes. And it just feels like more passive, not in the sense of like, oh, I'm just going to like roll over and let life happen. But it's like this passive, receptive, still very potent and powerful approach to creation. But it's allowing ourselves to just open and receive the blessings of the universe rather than have to be like constantly chasing after them.
And on the flip side, if someone feels like they need more, do you have any recommendations there?
Oh yeah. that part comes naturally to me. You know, I feel like a very yang practice would be to like write out what it is that you're wanting to cultivate in your life, and then pull up a calendar and make, I don't like to call them deadlines, but make lifelines or like goals, and then break it down and actually be like, okay, if I want to, you know, climb to the top of Half Dome, or, you know, and like go on this big adventure, I need to start training. And if I want to do it by summer of next year, then I better like get my butt to the gym for the first 3 months of 2021, and then follow that with 3 months of like hiking and practicing climbing other mountains. And I better get myself a good pair of shoes, and I better like research it a little bit and talk to some people that have done it, and like take an idea and break it down into what needs to happen to achieve that thing, and then put it on a calendar and take that action on a, you know, monthly, weekly, daily basis to get to your goals.
Very, very linear.
Very linear. Exactly. The feminine is like around and around and around. We just create this vortex of magnetism, and the masculine is like straight to the point.
So, Roxanne, you were mentioning studying ancient civilizations. Could you go into more detail with that for us, and kind of what you're most interested in, what you're most fascinated by at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, there's a lot that I'm fascinated about when it comes to ancient civilizations. I feel like we have so much to learn. Again, like, even our country, the American society that we're experiencing now is like 350 years old, which, that's a solid chunk of time. But when we're looking at the thousands of years that humans have been on Earth, it's really not very long in relationship to that. And there is so much that is still to be uncovered from these ancient civilizations. One thing that has been particularly exciting to me, because it actually gives me a lot of hope for where we're going as a race, is I recently learned from an incredible book I'm reading called When the Drummers Were Women. And it really charted more than I've ever seen. Like, I think I've heard these numbers before, but there was just something about when I was reading this particular chapter of the book, and it was talking about the Paleolithic period, and this huge chapter in time. Like, I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. And I still am not sure, like, at what point humanity really like entered the picture, but it was talking about like 500,000 to 50,000 BC. So that's like 450,000 years, and even if we were to say like maybe, okay, 10,000 years, maybe just like, 60,000 BC to 50,000 BC. And then there was I think it's like, then it's the megalithic period, and then, the period that we're in now. So this is like pre-flood, pre-ice age, like humanity back in the day, like the Sumerian experience of life, like goddess culture, right? Like the source of goddess culture. And what is amazing to me is that there's a lot of history to be found with this ancient culture. They were nomadic, they were artistic, there's artifacts, there's cave drawings, there is a recorded history. Even though they didn't have the written word yet, there's a recorded history of these ancient civilizations. And the coolest thing to me is that through all of their record keeping, which is mostly like cave paintings and also artifacts, like burial grounds where people were found buried with no clothes, no tomb, just naked in the fetal position in the earth, planted like seeds, oftentimes though wearing jewelry and adorned with a resin that they found that basically means that they were painted. So as maybe they were Neanderthals, but like they were still dressing up and having ritual. They still like played instruments and did cave paintings. So there was a degree of consciousness there. And get this, there is no record of aggression. There's no paintings of war. There's no weapons. There's no sign that these people were in combat with one another. They were hunter-gatherers, so they for sure there was maybe some degree of violence towards animals, but I believe that was been done in a peaceful, respectable way, and that was sustainable. And because their life depended on these beings, and so I think there was a lot of respect there. But the fact that they weren't battling each other for like somewhere between like 10 and 400,000 years, that I think alone is amazing to consider. Like, wow, for that long we were able to live sustainably with the earth. We were not fighting each other. There was enough for everybody. And, that's a huge piece of our story. And so, I think that if it was done at one point, it can be done again. and like all this energy and resources that are going towards war and, you know, raping and pillaging the planet and destroying the environment is, you know, something that can be reversed. And we can come back into that right relationship, especially if we pay attention to these ancient civilizations.
I always find it so fascinating when we right now, especially in our Western world, believe that we're more advanced than any civilization that's ever been here.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, spend a night in the Great Pyramid and it's just like, there is no way. Like, that is an ancient technology that is not understood in this day and age. And, you know, I think that even I was just watching on Gaia TV, I was watching a series with Jordan Maxwell talking about symbology. And he was like, you know, we talk about evolution, but like de-evolution is really more the case. Like, these ancient civilizations were able to do things that, you know, we think we're all like modern with high technology. And like, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the fact that we're able to sit here and have a real-time conversation and look each other face to face from thousands of miles away from each other is remarkable. But I do believe that there were technologies that were used in these ancient civilizations that seem almost fantastical nowadays, but because they lived in this completely different relationship to life and to, you know, their abilities, that there's like, it just seems like it would be fantasy. But yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of magical ways of existing that we've gone so linear, like you were saying, Shara, with the masculine, that we're actually kind of losing out on a lot of our abilities as divine beings.
Yeah, you were mentioning with Egypt and the pyramids. Do you have an idea or thoughts on how you believe that the pyramids were built or created?
Yeah, I have a couple. You know, I spent last December traveling through Egypt. We sailed up the Nile and stopped along temples, and it was really quite remarkable. Like, it was such a gift of a trip, and we got to spend time in all these temples and just like really feel them fully. And, you know, all the temples were amazing. And like, obviously, like, somehow these megalithic site, like, built by human hand back when, you know, supposedly we had very basic technology. And all that was amazing. Then the Great Pyramid and all the pyramids of Giza is like a whole other technology. Like, they aren't a tomb. They don't even really seem like a temple. They're very kind of, I mean, I don't want to use the word basic, but compared to the other temples, I mean, they're just these huge pyramids with a few chambers inside. And what it feels like being inside of the pyramids is like batteries. And there's a technology, the way that the pyramids are built, that the way that they're over, first of all, they have stones that are from nowhere near the Giza Plateau. So they've somehow imported these giant stones. And also it's over a water table. So like the way that, also I think it's the Tesla battery, the way that it worked with like shapes and water elements, like somehow I believe that the pyramids actually were like an ancient battery. And either they were created, I don't think they were created by slaves. I believe now that either they had a ability to have telekinesis and actually move things with their minds, or that particularly the pyramids were spaceships that landed on Earth and are just these, you know, we get to experience them now as these like ancient megalithic sites, but I think that they're actually like very potentially a galactic technology.
So potentially built off a planet and landed here.
Potentially. And then it's like I hear myself talking and I'm like, wow, I could sound like a crazy person. But it's like, how else do you explain it?
No, I mean, that's one of the great mysteries, right, of this world right now is that's what it is. It's just mystery.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about, I know that you are in right now in deep into an apprenticeship through the Academy of Oracle Arts.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that and the program and what that entails?
Yeah, I am an apprentice of a woman named Isis, and she is a really good student. She's been studying so many ancient civilizations and, like I mentioned, the Hermetic Kabbalah and specifically Egyptian cosmology for her whole life. And a year ago, I asked her to apprentice with her, and it shaped into this journey with 40 other students that are all just going in and studying deeply. And we have a board that we use that has the whole cosmological map of Earth and all the planets and stars and the archetypes of the tarot and the different spheres on the tree of life that are all on this board. And we use the board to divine rites and rituals to kind of recreate, because there's a lot of borrowed, traditions, but we are creating new traditions for, to create a community of belonging and to celebrate this revival of these ancient traditions in a modern way. And then through that journey, also, we have created the Academy of Oracle Arts. And that is essentially the way I'm describing it is it's a modern library of ancient teachings. And we're creating a platform for thought leaders and visionaries and activists to offer their teachings to the world, almost like a modern day Library of Alexandria. These libraries that have been destroyed and teachings that have been buried and or burned and buried, they've almost been lost, but there's a lot of people that have committed their lives to resuscitating these teachings. And through studies and through intuition, we are bringing it back. And then the role of the Oracle, the Academy of Oracle Arts, the oracular tradition is the spoken word. And it's also the path of just being a vessel and a voice for the divine. And so we're studying the art of divination and what it really means to listen to our own intuition and to find messages and meaning in the life around us, and to be able to kind of recreate that dialogue of humanity and spirit.
So is the academy open to the public?
Yeah, it is. We just launched. It's online. We do in-person things, but considering the times, mostly we're just focused online. We have a couple of courses. We have about 40 on the docket that we'll be releasing over the next 6 months. But right now we have the Art of Ritual, which is a 8-part course that Isis teaches of how to integrate more ritual into your life. We have a course on cacao as a tool for change. We've got a course that's starting tomorrow on earth alchemy. That's going to be a 6-month journey of herbology and earth wisdom. And then we've got a workshop coming up next month that will also be online called The Serpent Path. And that's working through the Tree of Life and all of the archetypal relationships that are there, and being able to look at life through the lens of the archetypes, which I found is really helpful in not taking things personally. And that, we're all kind of just playing out this archetypal theater in life.
When you say archetype, could you give us some examples of what some of them might be?
Yeah. So, the basic archetypes, like with the tarot, the major arcana is the fool, the magician, the emperor, the empress, the high priestess. These are kind of basic archetypes, but we also, experience archetypes on a daily basis of, those archetypes play out in our lives, as well as, like, for me, I play with the archetypes of Sagittarius, because that's where my sun is. I play a lot with the archetype of the moon, especially as a woman. My body is just in rhythm with the moon. So that is an archetype that's present in my life. Essentially archetypes are just like the different hats and masks that we put on. Sometimes I have to play the archetype of the CEO, or sometimes the archetype of the big sister. There's like these different personas that we get to play with as a part of being alive and being a human on earth.
So you're mentioning tarot. How exactly is it tarot or tarot, and how does it work?
I think it's like a tomato thing. Yeah, the art of divination has really been used, tarot has been used in the art of divination for a long time. I think one of the earliest forms of a divination tool is like stones or sticks or runes. And then that has evolved into, now there's a lot of different tarot or divination decks. You can like angel tarot or gods and goddesses, or, so many different types of fairy tarot. And I like to work with the classic. I have a lot of different decks that I play with, but the classic Rider-Waite version of tarot, which is the major arcana, which is those archetypes I was talking about earlier, the fool, the magician, the high priestess, death, all these different major archetypes. And then it also has the minor arcana, which is it's pentacles, cups, staffs, and spears, or wands, and swords. And those each represent a quality of like mind, elements, and then also like mind, body, like relationship to how, like, our senses, how we experience life. And so, how I would define the tarot and kind of how it works is it's essentially creating a conversation with creation, and a way to almost like get out of our own way and allow for chance to create dialogue of how we interpret life. And so I've started to use tarot. Really, I started to use it like 7 years ago, when I moved into a house in Los Angeles, and we would use tarot to pick our roommates. And it was actually a great system, because it was a community house and there was always people wanting to live there. And, personally, there would be people that I would like really want to live there, or people that I didn't really know or really care to live there. And there was a few different people in the house, so it was like our own personal opinions wouldn't always sync up. And we just decided to default to the tarot as our decision maker. And whatever, we would always pick a card for the person in the world and pick a card for the person in the house. And we ran our community home for like 3 years based on, we'd have roommates come in based on what cards we pulled. And it was great because it was totally not personal, and it never did us wrong. The house dynamic always worked out really well. And it was just committing to that archetypal relationship of this world that we're living in, and just being able to be like, look, it's not personal. You're just playing out a certain role in your life right now. And either that role will fit well with the house, or maybe it won't. And the cards did us great for that chapter. And now I use them, it's like, I wouldn't base like a huge life decision off of them, but I kind of do. And it's just another veil of perception to add to my own lens of seeing life that helps me to kind of put like my identity and all my own stuff off to the side, you know, because we have so many preconceived ideals that we develop through our life experience, and those don't always serve us. And so with the art of divination, it's about like, you know, of course, considering, because ultimately we're the interpreters, so we still bring back that perception, but being able to just get out of the way and let life give us messages and then interpret those messages. And the cards are a really great way to do that.
That's very divine feminine way of doing it, correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you ever, what's that, Leah?
No, you go for it.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you've ever pulled a card and been like, wait, no way, that can't be right. And then you want to pull another one.
Totally. I'm like, oh, no, put that back. But then more and more, I learned that like, that's even a part of it, right? Like maybe I pulled that card and that was an opportunity to be like, oh, okay, this dynamic is here. So, you know, it's something to be aware of, but then like I have the power over my own life to be like, okay, that's present, but like, I'm going to intentionally like look at another perspective and, you know, choose as a conscious creator which path I'm going to take.
I love that.
It's all just information. And then it's up to us what we do with it.
Is there a card? You have a card deck right now?
I wanted to do a divination reading with us, but I don't have my cards. So we'll have to do another episode and I can just do we could do a board reading or a tarot reading. And yeah, that'd be really fun.
Do you ever use pendulums?
I do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Same type of idea, right?
Yeah.
Allowing
it's an active, it becomes, I feel like with all these different modalities, it becomes like we become a participant in our experience, you know, because it's like the pendulum, I can totally make myself neutral, but somehow it's like my nervous system is working its way through that little ball and chain. And as much as I'm not moving, there's something in my being that is moving that pendulum, you know, or something within the experience that's moving it. So, you know, who's to say that, like, I mean, even prayer, like I've been meditating a lot and contemplating prayer because I'm like very much a prayer person. And I just believe so much in the power of prayer. And yet at the end of the day, it's like, who's to actually say if like that works? Right. But what I'm noticing through my contemplations is that like, whether or not it works, it makes me feel good. And that works, you know, and it gives me faith in what I'm praying for. And that creates an experience in my body and in my heart and my spirit that's like hopeful and faithful and has trust in my life and feels like there's something greater. And that is healthy and beneficial. And so whoever is listening to my prayers or not, I feel good. So at the end of the day, I'm like, well, that works.
Yeah, that's also personal.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
We were chatting before off air about some experiences that you've had with what some might call astral travel or remote viewing, something along those lines. I don't know if you'd be able to share some of your experiences with our listeners.
Yes, absolutely. I've got some great stories. It's something that I only have tapped into, ironically, kind of since COVID, which is like the best timing to practice your astral travel, since everybody's, you know, forced to stay at home right now. And, you know, I've been a traveler my whole life. I've almost, like, since being an adult, I've had a suitcase packed, you know, going somewhere. And we've all been kind of clipped from that reality. And it's pretty remarkable. Like, I also, at the same time that I started, you know, just a little backstory, at the same time that I started really diving into the potential of astral travel, I was also geeking out on Dr. Joe Dispenza. And, you know, he is an amazing author and thought leader in regards to how we can shape our reality through our thoughts. And he comes at it from a very scientific, academic point of view. And one thing that he talks about is what happens in our imagination. And my teacher, Isis, she says, you know, imagination is I am the magi of my nation. And it's one of the most underutilized magical tools that most adults really enforce in this day and age. Like, as children, our imagination is so active. But as we grow up, that's a quality that can be dampened because of society. And what Dr. Joe talks about is that what happens in our mind's eye is actually, in some ways, as real as what happens in this physical world. And that's why his clients are able to have tremendous healings. Or, you know, he's not the only one that talks about, like, when we have a strong intention and we really visualize and focus on that, we can, you know, get money in the bank, or get a new car, or get a new husband, or whatever it is that you're wanting to create. Like, when we hold that vision clear in our mind and really focus on it, it is very possible that it can then happen outside of our bodies. And also the experience in our brain, you know, what is firing in our brain when we think of a memory versus an imagination is the same. So as far as our brain knows, you know, it's all real, some degree of reality. So I was, like, reading Dr. Joe. And then what was a big catalyst for me was I had someone very close to me go through a traumatic experience in Egypt. He was arrested in Egypt and was put in jail and was being charged with 25 years for bringing seeds into Egypt. And seeds are just, like, crossing borders with seeds is never a good thing. And they were charging him with some pretty hefty charges. And so he was in jail in Egypt, which is, like, you never want to be in jail in Egypt. And he's someone I care about a lot. And I was working day in and day out to help him in every way I could to get out of there. And it was crazy timing too, because it was when COVID was really ramping up. And so they were going to close the airports, and he could only go from jail to the airport and leave Egypt. And so it was like, we had to get him out, and we had to get him on a plane. And he had a court case coming up. And you know, at the same time too, it was the beginning of 2020, and I was really deepening my relationship to my intuition and the art of receiving instruction and trusting that, like, if I had a vision come up for myself, I would follow through on it. So I had this vision of, in my imagination, traveling and going to Egypt and being able to be at the court with him when his trial came. And so I didn't kind of know all the details, but I just created space in my room. I created sacred space. I, like, cleaned my whole room, lit some candles, you know, saged everything down, just, like, really got intentional with myself, and then sat down in meditation. And I ended up talking myself through this astral journey where I had heard of the Merkaba before, but I had never, like, turned on my Merkaba. And it literally felt like I was driving a car for the first time. Like, I sat down, I was like, okay, I'm going to get in my Merkaba and I'm going to go to Egypt. And that's, like, all I knew. And in my imagination, I got this vision of, like, a pyramid above me. And, like, I was sitting in a pyramid that was facing up, and a pyramid that was facing down. And then both of the pyramids started spinning opposite direction to create like a toroidal field. And I just, in my imagination, had this Merkaba vehicle that I just like revved the engine. And before I left my house, I made a mercy potion, like a mercy tonic. And I just, in my imagination, I pulled herbs that I know are very soothing. So I had like rose and cedar and, you know, sage and things that are just like really soothing to the heart and the body and the nervous system. So I imagined that I made a tonic out of these herbs. And then in my mind's eye, in my imagination, I am the magi of my nation. I had looked at the map too, really, before I like left. I have a world map on my wall, and I was like, okay, here's my path that I'm taking. And so I imagined myself like hover up out of my room, and I looked down and saw my body below me. And I started talking myself out loud of like, okay, now I am flying over the Americas and, you know, crossing over the country. And then I'm going to get to the Atlantic Ocean, and I'm crossing over the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, now I'm going over North Africa. Okay, now I'm over Egypt. Okay, now I'm dropping down on Egypt, and I landed on top of the pyramid. And then I got to the pyramid, and I was like, okay, now I've got to get from Giza to Cairo, the whole grid of the city. And in my little Merkaba imagination vehicle, I went to the courthouse, and I went in the courthouse, and I'm like, okay, who's here? I gotta find my friend. And so I went and found my friend and checked in on him, and like put a little bit of my mercy tonic on him, and then to the lawyer and put a little bit on him, and like really like said a prayer for the lawyer and for my friend. And then I was like, okay, the judge, that's the most important person I have to find. So I went and I found the judge, and I like said a prayer for this judge. Like I was like praying for like his children's children, and like may his life be good and his health, and maybe he'd be like happy in his body and feeling really good today. And I like today. And you know, it's like 1 a.m. in California. It was like 9 a.m. in Egypt the next day. And I came back, you know, stayed in my Merkaba, flew back over the ocean, like came back, returned to myself, you know, ate some food. It's always good after doing that kind of work to like reground in this dimension. Mm-hmm. And went to sleep and woke up to a message in the morning that the judge had dropped every single case that he had that morning, which was like amazing because that's unheard of over there. Like in Egypt, they'll like, if they can't find the criminal, they'll. And my friend ended up getting out of the jail and onto a flight like 2 hours before the Egyptian airlines closed down for COVID, and, you know, is safe and sound back in California. And for me, I was like, wow, that was a huge initiation, because now, you know, I haven't done any like purposeful work like that, but now it's just for fun. And, you know, I'll go with friends. We'll be like, okay, well, where do you want to go? And we've like gone back to the 1920s. We've gone back to Egypt. I've gone to South America and China. And it's kind of great because since I'm stuck at home, like there's even a trip on the horizon coming up to go back to Egypt. And I'm like, well, I could go, but I actually also feel like I could just like save $10,000 and stay home and like just go in my imagination. So yeah, it's a funny. There's a lot to it though. The more that I learn, I mean, it's an ancient, powerful practice to astral travel and work with the Merkaba. And I think that any of this stuff, you know, works as much as we believe in it. Also, I'll say that too. So I'm having fun and exploring these more non-physical realms of existence.
Do you anticipate a course being available through your academy?
Yeah, from me sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like I'm still such a student But we are filming a course with a woman named Jennifer Dumper. I'm just talking to her later today, actually, and she's incredible. And she works with the astral in lucid dreaming, and then also translating that to our waking life and being able to go into these, they're called hypnagogic and hypnopompic states of almost like self-induced hypnotism, where we can like experience really incredible journeys through just our psyche. And it can be very healing. It can, you know, repair trauma. It can expand our awareness, and, you know, also just be really fun. And so she's teaching. And then, yeah, someday I would definitely love to offer some of my own teachings through the school as well.
It's incredible.
When you're in your Merkaba, or when you're doing your travels, are you always in your Merkaba while you're there, or do you step out of it? And when you interact with people, do they interact with you? Is it like you are really there?
Yeah. When, oh man, we had a fun one where it was our hot tub time machine. I was in a hot tub with a few friends who we'd been talking about it. And, you know, we were kind of still talking about it. And we were like, let's just do it. Let's just see what happens when we do this together. And so there was 4 of us in the hot tub, and we made a big Merkaba around the whole hot tub. And one of the guys he was like, can we go through time as well as through space? And I was like, sure, why not? So we together, all of us traveled. We had like a big Merkaba with the whole crew in our hot tub time machine. And we traveled back 100 years to the 1920s. We decided beforehand, we're like, okay, well, where should we go? We're like, let's go to the 20s and like experience, you know, because we're back in the 20s again. So we're like, let's experience the 1920s. And we went to New York City in the 1920s. And we landed and we got out of our Merkaba and we went to a dressing room. And it was kind of like if you've ever played that game where you're telling a story and then you like pass it and the next person tells a part of the story and the next person tells a part of the story. It was like that with all of our imaginations. And we had this amazing experience where we like got totally dressed up in speakeasy, you know, 1920s flapper outfits and like just total glam. And then we like got picked up in a limousine and we went to this club, this like underground speakeasy club, and we're all performers. And so we basically did a show back in the 1920s. And it was so fun. And we had like people interacting with us, and like we were drinking absinthe and doing this giant spectacular production, and like went out and had an after party, and we're like schmoozing with a bunch of people, and then eventually like went back and got in our Merkaba and came back into our hot tub, and it was great. And now I have that memory. Like with these friends, we have this memory of time traveling and doing this incredible show 100 years ago that is just like a fun thing that we get to share together.
It's so incredible. I'm so fascinated by this. So let me ask you this. If something were to happen to you while you're doing your travels, does it manifest in your current body when you get back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I've learned through Isis and Eve and their teachings is that you want to have an anchor. So you have something that, like, for me, I have like a crystal that now before I go, I'm like, okay, this is like my tether that's like keeping me here. And I think it's kind of a bit of like a matrix reality where like it can, you know, in our imagination, you know, ultimately it's like a dream. Like, I think it's true that like you'll never die in a dream. You'll always wake up before you die. You might like almost die, but I think that you'll never actually die in a dream. And I feel like it's kind of like that too, of like we have the power in these lucid states to like make the choice of like how Neo like eventually overthought the matrix and was like, this isn't real, you know, so he could like be shot and have nothing even happen to him. And I think it's that same ability to be like, okay, like my physical body is there, it's safe, it's tethered, and like I'm gonna go and I feel like the only thing that really does happen, at least what I've experienced so far, because I set the intention of like, I'm safe, I'm protected, I'm only here to do good work, and I'm not like making myself accessible to anything other than benevolent goodness. And I set that intention clearly. And then I also like pretty much would say that like the only way that it's affected me in this life is that it's broadened my awareness, and that there are experiences that I have that only build me, you know, as a person, and build my character and build my sense of imagination. And I take those gifts back with me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In a way, expanding your consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
And that's ultimately what we've got, you know, like our consciousness is such a precious gift. And, you know, I was just reading an article about how watching the news is literally bad for our immune system. Like the physiological response of like the amount of stress that it takes on, and just like, you know, the blue light from the TV and just like all this stuff that is creating can manifest as disease in the body. And, you know, that's a huge part of my life as a wellness practitioner, is helping people to combat the bombardment of stress that is in our environment today. And it's like my lucid state and my Merkaba journeys are like pretty much better than anything I can watch on TV nowadays. And it makes me feel good. Like it generates a sense of vitality and upliftment in my spirit. And so I feel like that's very beneficial, and, you know, something that, you know, more people could benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, our consciousness is shaped by the music we listen to, the TV we watch, you know, obviously our thoughts are things. Our whole life, our perception of life is shaped by what we let into our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people their consciousness is just being like bruised by negativity. And what that does to the collective is kind of a scary thing too. So I feel a personal sense of responsibility to develop and expand my consciousness and be a beacon of light and beauty in this world, to kind of balance out this reality that we're living in that's just like so filled with negativity and disempowering messages.
Mm-hmm. 1,000,000%. Yeah. We ask our guests every time towards the end of the interview about vibration, because that's one of the things that we consistently talk about on Cosmic Soul Sisters. We ask them, what kinds of music do you listen to keep your vibration high? Because we recognize that's a huge part of, you know, staying positive.
Yeah, great question. Well, I mean, I'm a dancer, and music is a huge part of my life. I also am a big fan of medicine music and sound healing. And so the music I listen to is pretty full spectrum. Like sometimes I just put on like singing bowls, or, you know, mantras and different chants that are truly, I mean, sound as vibration. Like pretty much this whole existence is made up of light and sound waves. And so I imagine like sound is like literally penetrating the cells of my being, for better or for worse. Mm-hmm. And I just this year, actually like last week, it's been a developing thing, but I finally I started a record label. I've had a production company for almost a decade, and we just evolved it into a label. And the vision is to really focus on music that can, you know, be considered like pop music and part of pop culture, but that has a positive message. Because unfortunately, like most of the top 40 tracks are about, you know, violence and crimes. And like, I mean, yeah, like the whole piece that I'll just throw in here of like music as vibration and the power that it has, that a lot of people don't realize, is like hip hop music was funded at the same time that the prison industry was privatized. so essentially it's like a shame, because I feel like there's like these young Black men that are huge hip hop stars that are being paid a lot of money to rap about gang banging and, you know, violence and crimes, and they're doing an incredible injustice to their own people by feeding this prison system. Because when young kids are listening to this rap music, and it's literally mantras that are going in and lowering their vibration and making them think that like, oh, it's cool to treat women poorly, and it's cool to, you know, do these things that are illegal, and then they end up in prison, and literally like these rap stars are doing harm to their own people. And so our vision is to, you know, combat that through making music that's still fun and still like makes you want to dance and like get wild, but in a way that's beautiful and beneficial. And so I mean, I listen to a lot of music. I love Beyonce. I think she's an amazing artist. Like, she's like a huge hero for me. And like, I think a lot of her music is doing good towards like, especially towards empowering Black women, which is one of the most disempowered groups of people in our country. But then I also like get down with Deva Premal and like mantra music. So I'm like very full spectrum with my music taste. Yeah.
I love it that you're doing that with the record label. That is so needed.
Yeah.
It is so needed right now. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
What is
and
the name of your record label?
Yeah, the label's called Convergence. And the first artist on the label is my cosmic soul sister, beauty sister from another Mr. Ruby Chase. And so if you want to tune into her, she's definitely, right now, her music is falling a lot under the category of like bass music. But when you listen to the lyrics, you know, what she's talking about is really uplifting, and it's a positive message that, you know, our hope is to be able to give something to the next generation that like when they're singing along to it, they're singing stories that are affirming their existence rather than, you know, being toxic to their consciousness.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so incredible.
Yeah. Roxanne, you're doing so many wonderful things, so much goodness in the world that you're bringing.
Yeah, I'm just inspired and really devoted to leaving things better than I found them. And I think that life is a gift. And so, you know, I want to do the best I can with it.
Can you tell us where we can point our listeners to find more of the things that you're working on?
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I mean, they can reach out to me directly on Instagram. My tag is my name, Roxanne Ruby. And that's a huge platform for me to be in touch directly with people. And then the Academy of Oracle Arts is alive and happening. Also, we have Academy of Oracle Arts on Instagram, or just academyoforaclearts.com. And that's, you know, our budding community. And it really is meant to be a space of belonging and participation. So, you know, the more people connect there, then the more we're just building whatever that is meant to be together. And yeah, I also work a lot with herbs and superfoods and leading physical transformations in order to be the best version and vessel of our spirits. And so that's something I document a lot through my Instagram, and Shara and I have teamed up to help facilitate physical transformation for people, which I believe that the more we're able to tend to this physical temple, then the more spiritual magnitude that we have as, you know, houses to our souls. And so that's, you know, you can tune in with Shara, or you can reach out to me directly, and we lead group transformations on a regular basis and just really help people to transform. One of the Hermetic philosophies is as within, so without, as above, so below. When the two become one, we enter the kingdom of heaven. And so as we transform our insides, we can transform our outsides, and then through that active practice, we can experience heaven on earth.
You are incredible. I'm so grateful we got to talk to you today. Really,
you.
it's an
Same.
absolute honor.
Yeah, an honor for me. Thank you for hosting me. And yeah, I'm excited to come up and get to visit you ladies in Montana and maybe do another episode next year and just keep this conversation going. And yeah, I feel like these are the topics that we get to talk about now to bring some hope and some healing into a world that really needs it.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Beautiful. Thank you, ladies. It's been
Thank
such a joy.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. And
Sure.
we'll be in touch. We'd love to have you on again sometime.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Aloha. Namaste.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Huge gratitude for our guest, Roxanne Ruby. We look forward to speaking with her again. And until next time, we are sending love and light to you and all of our cosmic family. Goodbye for now.
Bye, guys.